Robert loved Tuesday mornings at the marina. The air smelled like salt and coffee, and the gentle rocking of the boats created a rhythm that never got old. He'd park his truck in the same spot, grab his thermos, and walk down to Slip 47 where his boat had been docked for the past 12 years. It wasn't a fancy yacht or anything like that. Just a solid 32-foot cruiser that he'd saved up for years to buy. But it was his escape, his piece of freedom on the water. That particular Tuesday started like any other. Robert whistled as he walked down the wooden dock, nodding to old Pete, who was already out washing his deck. The morning sun cast long shadows across the water, and seagulls called overhead. Everything seemed perfectly normal until Robert got close enough to see his boat. There was something attached to the windshield, a bright yellow paper. Flapping in the breeze, Robert's first thought was that it might be a note from the marina office about some maintenance issue. Maybe they were planning to paint the docks or something. He climbed aboard and pulled the paper free, expecting a quick read. What he got instead made his coffee suddenly taste bitter. The notice was printed on official-looking letterhead. Harborview Marina Community Association, it said across the top in bold letters. Below that, in smaller print, were 6 full paragraphs of new rules and requirements. Robert read it once, blinked, then read it again more slowly. According to this notice, the marina was now under new management. Well, not exactly new management, but new oversight. The Homeowners Association from the fancy condo building that had gone up 2 years ago was now claiming authority over marina operations. And they had a whole list of changes they were implementing immediately. First on the list was a mandatory monthly fee of $450. Robert did the math in his head. He already paid marina fees to the property management company. Those ran him about $280 a month. This new fee would be on top of that existing charge. Second, there were new access hours. The marina would be open from 7 in the morning until 9 at night. Anyone wanting to access their boat outside those hours would need to submit a written request 72 hours in advance and receive approval from the HOA board. Third, any modifications to boats, including painting, equipment, installation, or structural changes would require HOA approval. Applications would be reviewed monthly at board meetings. Fourth, this one really got Robert's attention, there would be no more overnight stays on boats. The marina was being reclassified as a day-use facility only. Fifth, all boat owners needed to submit proof of insurance, registration, and ownership documents to the HOA within 30 days. And sixth, failure to comply with any of these new regulations would result in fines, starting at $500 per violation. Robert stood there on his boat deck, the yellow paper trembling slightly in his hand. This couldn't be right. He'd owned this boat slip for 12 years. Not rented it, owned it. When the original marina owner had sold off the slips back in the day, Robert had been one of the first buyers. He had a deed, an actual property deed, just like someone would have for a house or a piece of land. That deed gave him the right to dock his boat at Slip 47 forever. The fancy condos had gone up. At about 2 years back on the property next to the marina, Robert remembered watching the construction. The way the building rose higher and higher until it blocked the afternoon sun from half the docks. The people who moved in were a different crowd than the boat owners. Lots of luxury cars, designer dogs, and an attitude that everything should be just so. The HOA had formed shortly after the building opened. Robert had heard about some of their antics from friends who lived in similar buildings. Acts could be reasonable, or they could be nightmares. It all depended on who was running them and how much power they thought they had. But this was something else entirely. How could they suddenly claim control over the marina? Robert pulled out his phone and called the marina office. A recorded message told him the office was closed on Tuesdays and to call back during business hours. He hung up and looked around the dock. Other boats had the same yellow notices attached. Robert could see them fluttering in the breeze, bright spots of yellow against the white fiberglass hulls. He wondered if anyone else had seen them yet. Pete's boat didn't have one, but Pete had been there since 5 in the morning. Maybe he'd already taken his down. Robert walked over to Pete's boat. The old man was coiling a rope, his weathered hands moving with practiced ease. You get one of these? Robert asked, holding up the yellow paper. Pete glanced at it and snorted. Yep, took mine down an hour ago. Bunch of nonsense if you ask me. You going to pay it? The fee? Pete shrugged. Don't have much choice, do I? I rent my slip month to month. If they want to add fees, I either pay or leave. You've been here 15 years. Doesn't matter. I'm a renter. You, though, you own your slip, right? Robert nodded. Got the deed in my safe at home. Then you might have options I don't, Pete said. I'd want to look into that before you do anything. Robert thanked him and headed back to his boat. He sat in the captain's chair and read the notice for a third time. Something about it felt wrong beyond just the inconvenience and extra cost. The language was aggressive. Phrases like mandatory compliance and immediate implementation and penalties will be strictly enforced. He thought about his deed. When he'd bought the slip, the lawyer had explained that it was real property, same as buying a parking space or a storage unit. The deed specifically stated that he owned slip 47 in perpetuity. That meant forever. And there had been language in there about the slip being independent of any future associations or governing bodies. Robert remembered that part because it had seemed like odd legal speak at the time. But the lawyer had insisted it was important protection. The question was, did this HOA know about those deeds? Or were they just assuming everyone at the marina was a renter they could push around? Robert decided to wait until he could talk to the marina management company. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe the HOA had overstepped and didn't realize it. He'd give them the benefit of the doubt, but as he locked up his boat and walked back to his truck, Robert couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to be more complicated than a simple phone call could fix. He'd worked too hard and saved too long to own this piece of waterfront property. If the HOA thought they could just take control of it with a yellow piece of paper and some fancy letterhead, they had another thing coming the next morning. Robert called the marina management company first thing. He was transferred 3 times before finally reaching someone who seemed to know what was going on. The woman on the phone, Lisa from accounting, sounded tired. Yes, we've been getting a lot of calls about the notices, she said. The situation is complicated. How complicated can it be? Robert asked. I own my slip. I have a deed. The HOA claims they purchased management rights to the marina facilities, Lisa explained. We're working with our legal team to sort out exactly what that means. Management rights. What does that even mean? Honestly, we're not entirely sure. The sale happened at the corporate level, and the details are still being clarified. Robert felt his frustration growing. So what am I supposed to do about these fees they're demanding? For now, we recommend keeping records of everything and not making any payments to the HOA until this is resolved, Lisa said. But I can't give you legal advice. You might want to consult with an attorney. An attorney. That meant money, time, and stress. Robert thanked Lisa and hung up. He pulled out his deed from the safe and read through it carefully. The legal language was dense, but certain phrases stood out. Independent ownership, perpetual rights, not subject to future associations. Robert had spent his whole career as a diesel mechanic, fixing engines and solving problems. This was a different kind of problem, but the approach was the same. Understand what you're dealing with, gather your tools, and don't let anyone tell. Something can't be fixed when you know it can. He took a photo of his deed with his phone and started making calls. He had a feeling this was just the beginning. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at 7 o'clock in the community room of the condo building. Robert showed up 15 minutes early with his deed in a manila folder and a notepad in his back pocket. He'd spent the past 2 days researching property law online and talking to other boat owners at the marina. What he'd learned hadn't made him feel any better about the plus situation. The community room was all polished floors and modern furniture. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the marina, where Robert could see his boat among the others. About 30 people were already seated in rows of chairs facing a long table at the front. Robert recognized a few faces from the marina, but most of the crowd appeared to be condo residents. At the front table sat 5 people, all dressed like they'd just come from office jobs. The woman in the center had perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her nameplate read Diane Patterson, HOA president. She was shuffling papers and occasionally whispering to the man on her left. Who Robert guessed was probably their lawyer, based on his expensive suit and bored expression. Robert took a seat in the third row and waited. The meeting started exactly at 7, with Diane tapping a gavel that seemed unnecessary for a group this size. She went through standard HOA business first. Pool maintenance budget, landscaping proposals, a complaint about someone's unauthorized balcony furniture. Robert watched the clock and waited for his chance. Finally, after 30 minutes of mundane discussion, Diane moved on to what she called new business regarding marina operations, smiled at the room, and launched into a prepared speech about how the HOA was committed to maintaining property values and creating a cohesive community experience. As many of you know, Diane said, the association has recently acquired management oversight of the marina facilities. This is an exciting development that will allow us to ensure consistent standards and proper maintenance throughout our waterfront community. Robert raised his hand. Diane's eyes flickered toward him, then away. We've implemented several necessary policies, she continued, ignoring him. These include standardized fees, reasonable access hours, and safety protocols that will benefit everyone. Robert kept his hand up. A few people turned to look at him. Diane kept talking. The board has carefully considered these policies and believes they represent the best interests of the entire community. We understand that change can be difficult, but we're confident that these measures will enhance everyone's experience and protect our collective investment. Excuse me, Robert said loudly, not waiting to be called on anymore. I have questions about these policies. The room went quiet. Diane's smile tightened. We'll have time for questions after the presentation. I think these questions are pretty relevant to the presentation, Robert said, standing up. You mentioned that the HOA acquired management oversight of the marina. Can you explain exactly what that means? Diane glanced at her lawyer, who gave a small nod. The association purchased management rights from the development company that owned the adjacent properties. This gives us authority over marina operations in common areas. But the marina isn't owned by the development company, Robert said. It's owned by a separate property trust, and some of the slips, including mine, are individually owned with deeds. How can you have management authority over property you don't own? A murmur went through the crowd. Diane's smile vanished completely. Individual slip arrangements don't negate our oversight authority. All marina facilities are subject to HOA governance as outlined in our management agreement. Robert pulled out his deed and held it up. This deed says my slip is independent of any future associations or governing bodies. It's right here in black and white. I own this property outright. The lawyer leaned over and whispered something to Diane. She listened, then turned back to Robert with a look that was pure ice. Sir, I understand you may have concerns, but this meeting isn't the appropriate venue for individual disputes. If you have specific legal questions, you're welcome to submit them in writing to the board. This isn't an individual dispute, Robert said. There are at least 6 other boat owners with the same type of deed. We all own our slips independently. You can't just claim authority over property you don't control. The board has consulted with legal counsel and is confident in its position, Diane said, her voice sharp. The policies we've implemented are valid and will be enforced. Now, if there are no other questions, we'll move on to— I'm not done, Robert interrupted. You're charging us $450 a month, on top of our existing marina fees. You're restricting our access to our own property. You're banning overnight stays? None of this is legal if you don't actually have authority over our slips. Diane set down her papers with a deliberate movement. Mr. Thompson. Robert Thompson. Mr. Thompson, I'm going to say this once. The HOA has made its decision based on proper legal channels. If you choose not to comply with our policies, there will be consequences. We have the authority to impose fines, restrict marina access, and if necessary, pursue legal action against non-compliant slip holders. I suggest you carefully consider whether you want to be the person who makes this difficult for everyone. It was a threat, plain and simple. Robert felt heat rising in his chest, but he kept his voice level. Are you saying you'll fine me for using property I legally own? I'm saying that all marina users must follow the rules, Diane replied. That includes you. The fee structure is mandatory. The access hours are mandatory. The prohibition on overnight stays is mandatory. If you can't accept that, perhaps you should consider relocating your boat to another facility. Several condo residents in the front row nodded in agreement. One woman actually applauded. Robert looked around the room and realized most of these people didn't care about the boat owners. They just wanted a prettier view and fewer people around the marina at night. "You can't force me out of property I own," Robert said. "We'll see about that," Diane replied. "Now, if you'll please sit down, we have other business to attend to." Robert stayed standing for another moment, then sat down. He'd made his point, even if Diane wasn't interested in hearing it. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. He barely heard the discussion about new lobby furniture or the debate over guest parking policies. His mind was racing through possibilities and next steps. After the meeting ended, Robert tried to approach Diane, but she was immediately surrounded by condo residents, praising her handling of the situation. The lawyer gave Robert a dismissive glance and left through a side door. Robert walked out into the parking lot feeling like he'd just been in a fight. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Pete. "How'd it go?" Robert typed back, "Not great. They're not backing down. Figured as much. Come by the marina tomorrow. Got some folks who want to talk to you." The next morning, Robert found 5 other boat owners gathered near Pete's slip. There was Gerald, a retired postal worker with a weathered face and calloused hands. Linda, a middle-aged woman who worked as a nurse and used her boat for weekend getaways. Tom and Alice, a couple in their 60s who'd bought their slip as an investment for retirement. And Vincent, a quiet guy in his 40s who did something with computers and kept mostly to himself. They all had the same yellow notices. And after some discussion, it turned out they all had similar deeds. "I bought mine 9 years ago," Gerald said. "Paid cash for it. Never thought I'd have to justify owning my own property." Linda shook her head. "I'm on a fixed schedule at the hospital. I can't be submitting written requests 3 days in advance just to check on my boat before my shift starts." Tom spoke up, his voice rough with frustration. "Alice and I were planning to spend our retirement living on our boat part of the year. Now they're saying we can't even stay overnight?" Vincent had been quiet, but now he pulled out his phone and showed them something. "I did some research last night. The development company that supposedly sold management rights to the HOA, they never owned the marina. They owned the land around it, but the marina itself is held in a separate trust. Has been for 20 years. Robert felt a surge of vindication. So the HOA bought something that was never for sale in the first place. "Looks that way," Vincent said. "I found the original trust documents filed with the county. The marina property is completely separate from the condo development. Do you think they know that?" Linda asked. Gerald snorted. "Doesn't matter if they know it or not. What matters is they're acting like they own something they don't." They talked for another hour, sharing information and frustrations. By the end of it, they'd made a decision. They needed a lawyer who specialized in property law. Someone who could look at their deeds and the HOA's claims and tell them where they stood. Robert volunteered to start making calls. He'd saved up money over the years, and this seemed like something worth spending it on. The others agreed to pitch in for legal costs if needed. But before Robert could start his search, something happened that made the situation much more urgent. The following Monday, Robert drove to the marina like always. But when he tried to use his key card to open the gate, it didn't work. The light blinked red and the lock stayed engaged. He tried again. Same result. A security guard appeared from the marina office, a young guy Robert had never seen before. "Can I help you?" "My card isn't working," Robert said. The guard checked his tablet. "Robert Thompson, your access has been suspended." "Suspended? On whose authority?" "HOA directive. It says here you failed to submit required documentation and didn't pay your fees. You'll need to resolve that with the association before your access can be restored." Robert felt his pulse pounding in his ears. "That's my boat in there. My property. You can't block me from accessing my own property." The guard looked uncomfortable. "Sir, I'm just doing my job. You'll need to take this up with the HOA office." Robert stood there for a moment, looking through the chain-link fence at his boat, floating peacefully in its slip. Everything he'd worked for, just sitting there, and he couldn't reach it because of some bureaucratic power play. He turned and walked back to his truck, pulling out his phone as he went. This had just become war, and Robert Thompson wasn't the type to back down from a fight, especially when he knew he was right. Robert spent the rest of Monday morning making phone calls. Most lawyers he reached either didn't handle property disputes or wanted retainer fees that made his stomach drop. By noon, he'd left messages with 6 different law firms and was starting to feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. His phone rang just after lunch. The number wasn't one he recognized. Mr. Thompson. This is Jennifer Wright from Coastal Property Law. I got your message about an HOA dispute involving Marina property. Robert explained the situation as clearly as he could. The deeds, the HOA's claims, the new fees, and now the blocked access to his own boat. Jennifer listened without interrupting, which Robert appreciated. Too many of the other lawyers had cut him off to explain why his case wasn't worth their time. Can you email me a copy of your deed? Jennifer asked when he finished. Sure, but I should tell you up front, there are 6 other boat owners in the same situation. We're all willing to pitch in on legal costs, but none of us are wealthy people. Let me look at the deed first, Jennifer said. If this is what it sounds like, you might have a stronger case than you realize. Sometimes these things can be resolved with a strongly worded letter and don't require full litigation. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? Robert agreed and spent the evening scanning his deed and emailing it over. He also reached out to the other boat owners to let them know they might have found someone to help. Vincent responded immediately, offering to compile all their deeds and any documentation they had about the Marina ownership structure. Tuesday morning. Robert arrived at Jennifer's office in a modest building near downtown. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe late 30s, with dark hair pulled back and a no-nonsense air about her. Her office was organized but not fancy, which Robert found reassuring. The lawyers with the marble-topped desks hadn't wanted to touch his case. Coffee? Jennifer offered, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. Good, thanks. Jennifer opened a folder containing printouts of his deed. She'd already marked several sections with colored tabs. Mr. Thompson, I've looked over your deed pretty carefully. I also did some preliminary research into the Marina property history and the HOA's claims. I have good news and complicated news. I'll take the good news first. Your deed is rock solid, Jennifer said, tapping the document. This language here about perpetual ownership independent of future associations is exactly the kind of protective language that prevents situations like this. Whoever drafted this deed knew what they were doing. Robert felt relief wash over him. So the HOA can't control my slip? Not based on what I'm seeing. But that's where the complicated part comes in. The HOA believes they have authority, and they've already taken action against you. Even if they're wrong, we need to prove it and force them to back down. That means understanding exactly what they think they bought and where their claim falls apart. Jennifer pulled up something on her computer screen. I spent some time yesterday digging into public records. The Marina property has an interesting history. It was established in 1998 under a commercial trust. That trust still owns the physical marina structure, the docks, and the water rights. When individual slips were sold off starting in 2012, they were carved out as separate parcels with their own deeds. But the overall marina operation remained under the trust's management. So what did the HOA buy? That's what I'm trying to figure out, Jennifer said. They claim they purchased management rights from Bayside Development Corporation, which built the condos. But Bayside never owned the marina. They owned the adjacent land and had some kind of lease agreement with the Marina Trust for shared amenities. Parking spaces, that kind of thing. So they sold something they didn't have? Possibly. Or there's some agreement I haven't found yet that gave them limited rights they've now exceeded. I need to see the actual purchase agreement between the HOA and Bayside Development. Robert shifted in his chair. How do we get that? We ask for it. Politely at first, then through legal channels if necessary. HOAs are supposed to maintain certain records and make them available to affected parties. You own property that they claim jurisdiction over, which gives you standing to request documentation.
Oh.
Jennifer made some notes on a legal pad. Here's what I want to do. First, I'm going to draft a formal request for documents. The HOA's purchase agreement, their bylaws, any legal opinions they received about their authority over the marina. Second, I want to gather the deeds from all the other boat owners in your situation and confirm they have the same protective language. Third, I want to file a complaint with the county about your access being blocked. You own property, you're current on all legitimate fees, and they've prevented you from reaching it. That's a problem. How long will all this take? The document request should get a response within 2 weeks if they're following proper procedures. The county complaint might take longer. But here's the thing, Mr. Thompson. Once we start pushing back officially, the HOA has two choices. Either they realize they've overstepped and back down, or they double down and we end up in court. And if we end up in court, Jennifer leaned back in her chair. Based on what I'm seeing, I think you'd win. The question is how much it costs to get there and whether the HOA has insurance that would cover their legal fees. Some HOAs have deep pockets and expensive lawyers. Others fold quickly when they realize they're wrong. Robert thought about Diane and her cold smile at the meeting. This HOA doesn't seem like the folding type. Then we need to make our case airtight before we escalate, Jennifer said. I'm going to be honest with you. This could get expensive. My hourly rate is $250. If we have to go to court, you're looking at potentially tens of thousands in legal fees, even for a case I think we'd win. Robert felt his stomach tighten. He had savings, but not that kind of money. What if we lose? If you lose, you'd be responsible for your own legal fees. The HOA probably wouldn't recover costs from you unless they could prove the lawsuit was frivolous, which it isn't. But losing would mean accepting their authority and paying whatever fees they demand going forward, or selling my slip and leaving. That too, Jennifer admitted. Look, I don't want to sugarcoat this. Legal battles are stressful and expensive, even when you're in the right. But what the HOA is doing to you isn't legal based on what I'm seeing. The question is whether you want to fight it. Robert thought about his boat, about the 12 years he'd spent fixing it up and taking it out on weekends. He thought about the principle of the thing. He'd worked hard, followed the rules, bought property legally, and now some association that didn't even exist when he made his purchase was trying to control what he'd earned. I want to fight it, he said. But I need to talk to the other boat owners first. We're all in this together, smart Jennifer said. A unified front is stronger. If all 6 of you are willing to share costs and present a joint case that changes the math considerably. They spent another hour going over details. Jennifer explained the legal process, the potential timelines, and what documents she'd need from each boat owner. By the time Robert left her office, he had a plan, and something he hadn't had since finding that yellow notice on his boat. Hope. That evening. The boat owners met at a coffee shop near the marina. Robert laid out everything Jennifer had told him. Gerald immediately said he was in for whatever it cost. Linda hesitated but agreed. Tom and Alice talked quietly for a moment, then nodded together. Vincent had been researching on his laptop while Robert talked and looked up with a grim expression. I found the purchase agreement, Vincent said, turning his laptop around. It's in the public records, but buried in a weird filing category. The HOA paid Bayside Development $75,000 for what's listed as management and operational oversight of shared amenity spaces. What does that mean? Linda asked. Vincent scrolled through the document. It's vague on purpose. Talks about maintaining common areas, enforcing community standards, managing access to shared facilities. But here's the thing. It specifically lists the amenities covered, the parking area, the landscaping between the condos and Marina, and the walkway along the waterfront. It doesn't mention the docks. Robert asked. Not explicitly. There's some language about marina facilities, but it's unclear whether that means the physical structures or just the areas adjacent to the condos.
Owls.
Like they're interpreting it broadly to include everything, Tom said. Exactly, Vincent agreed. They bought limited rights and decided that meant total control. Gerald leaned forward. So what's our move? Robert pulled out the paperwork Jennifer had given him. Our lawyer wants to request all their documents formally. Force them to show us exactly what they think they bought. She also wants to file a complaint about them blocking my access. And she needs copies of all our deeds to confirm we're protected. How much is this going to cost? Alice asked quietly. $250 an hour for the lawyer. She estimated if we split it 6 ways and things go smoothly, maybe a couple thousand each. If it goes to court, potentially a lot more. The table went quiet. A couple $1,000s wasn't nothing for any of them. Gerald broke the silence first. I'm retired, he said. Living on a fixed income, but I spent 40 years delivering mail in all kinds of weather, saving up to afford that boat. I'll be damned if some HOA that didn't exist 5 years ago is going to take it away from me. I'm in. One by one, the others agreed. They'd pool their resources, share the legal costs, and see this through. Vincent offered to handle document organization and research. Linda said she'd keep detailed records of everything. Tom volunteered to be the point person for communication with the other boat owners at the marina who weren't directly involved but might be affected. There's one more thing, Robert said. Jennifer mentioned that once we push back officially, the HOA might escalate. They could increase fines, file their own legal actions, make things more difficult. We need to be prepared for this to get worse before it gets better. Let them try, Gerald said. We've got the law on our side. Robert hoped he was right. But as he drove home that night, he couldn't shake the image of Diane's face at that meeting. The cold certainty in her voice when she'd threatened him. The HOA had money, organization, the backing of dozens of condo owners who wanted the marina. Cleaned up and controlled, all Robert and his friends had were their deeds. A good lawyer, and the stubborn belief that being right should matter. He pulled into his driveway and sat in the truck for a moment, looking at his phone. Tomorrow, Jennifer would send the formal document requests. Tomorrow, this would become official. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. Robert took a deep breath and headed inside. He had work to do. Jennifer's formal document request went out on a Wednesday morning via certified mail. By Friday afternoon, Robert had his access card working again. No explanation, no apology. Just a terse email from the HOA saying his marina access had been administratively restored pending resolution of outstanding matters. That's a good sign, Jennifer told him over the phone. They're worried. Probably talked to their lawyer who told them blocking your access to property you own was a liability. So they're backing down? Not necessarily. Just being more careful. We'll see what documents they send us. The documents arrived 12 days later. Jennifer called Robert as soon as she'd reviewed them. Can you get everyone together? I need to show you what we're dealing with. They met at Jennifer's office on a Tuesday evening. She'd ordered pizza and cleared her conference table, spreading out printouts of the HOA's response. The 6 boat owners crowded around while Jennifer walked them through what she'd found. The good news is, they sent everything we asked for, Jennifer began. The purchase agreement, their bylaws, meeting minutes, even a legal opinion from their attorney. The bad news is, their lawyer is either incompetent or deliberately misleading them. She pointed to the purchase agreement first. This document gives the HOA rights to manage shared amenities between the condo property and the marina, parking, landscaping, walkways. Vincent was right about that. But look at this section here. Jennifer highlighted a paragraph buried on page 7. It says the HOA shall have authority to establish reasonable rules and fees for the use of said amenities to ensure proper maintenance and community standards. Their lawyer interpreted that to mean they can regulate anything connected to the marina. That's a huge stretch, Vincent said. It's more than a stretch. It's wrong. But here's where it gets interesting. Jennifer pulled out another document. This is the legal opinion their attorney provided to the board. It says, and I quote, that the HOA's purchase of management rights extends to all marina operations and gives them authority to impose fees and restrictions on slip holders. Can they do that? Linda asked. No, because look at what the opinion doesn't mention. Jennifer laid out the D documents. Your individual ownership. The attorney's opinion doesn't address the fact that several slips are owned outright with deeds that explicitly prohibit association control. Either their lawyer didn't know about the deeds, or he chose to ignore them. Gerald leaned closer to read the documents. So they're operating on bad legal advice? Or they know they're on shaky ground and don't care, Jennifer said. I've seen this before. HOAs sometimes bet that people won't fight back because legal battles are expensive and stressful. They figure if they act authoritative enough, most people will just comply. What's our next move? Robert asked. Jennifer pulled out a thick document she'd prepared. We request an emergency meeting with the HOA board. We present them with copies of all the deeds, explain why their legal opinion is flawed, and give them a chance to back down gracefully. If they refuse, we file suit, and if they agree to meet, then we make our case and see how they respond. I've drafted a settlement proposal. They immediately rescind all fees, fines, and restrictions on the deed holders. They issue a formal acknowledgement that the 6 of you have independent ownership rights not subject to HOA control. They reimburse any fees already collected, and they agree not to interfere with your slip ownership going forward. Tom whistled. They're not going to like that. They don't have to like it, Jennifer said. They just have to accept reality. The alternative is litigation that will cost them a lot more than the fees they're trying to collect.
Alice
spoke up, her voice uncertain. What if they say no, and we go to court? What are our chances? Jennifer met her eyes directly. Based on these documents and your deeds, I'd say 90% or better. The law is clear. You own your slips. The HOA doesn't have authority over them. Their purchase agreement doesn't give them what they claim it does. Any judge who looks at this will see that immediately. But, Robert said because he could hear the hesitation in Jennifer's voice, but nothing in litigation is guaranteed, and even winning can be expensive. We're talking depositions, discovery, maybe expert witnesses on property law. If they decide to fight this all the way, you're each looking at potentially $10,000 to $15,000 in legal costs. And the room went quiet. That was real money for all of them. Gerald's hand shook slightly as he picked up his coffee cup. Linda closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Robert felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was the one who'd pushed for this, encouraged everyone to fight. I'll say we give them the chance to do the right thing, Gerald said finally. Request the meeting. Make our case. If they're reasonable people, they'll see they're wrong and fix it. And if they're not reasonable, Vincent asked. Then we decide if we're willing to go all the way, Gerald said. But at least we tried the easy path first. The others agreed. Jennifer said she'd send the meeting request the next morning. As everyone was packing up to leave, she pulled Robert aside. I need you to be prepared for how this might go, she said quietly. HOA boards don't like being challenged. They especially don't like being told they're wrong in front of witnesses. This meeting could get heated. I can handle heated. I know you can. But keep your cool no matter what they say. We need to be the reasonable ones in the room. Let me do most of the talking, and if you feel yourself getting angry, just squeeze your folder or something. Don't give them ammunition to paint you as the problem. Robert nodded, though he wasn't sure he could stay calm if Diane started throwing around threats again. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday evening. The HOA insisted it be held in their community room, which Jennifer said was a power play but not worth fighting about. They showed up 15 minutes early as a group. All 6 boat owners plus Jennifer. The HOA board was already there, arranged behind their table like judges. Diane sat in the center, flanked by her 4 board members. Their attorney, a man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive watch, sat at the end. He looked bored, like this was just another routine meeting for him. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Jennifer began, keeping her tone professional and neutral. We're always happy to discuss community matters with residents, Diane said. Though her expression suggested otherwise, Jennifer laid out the deeds on the table where everyone could see them. These documents represent individual ownership of 6 boat slips at Harborview Marina. Each deed contains specific language establishing the slip as independent property, not subject to homeowners association control. The HOA's attorney leaned forward to look at the documents. Diane didn't move. We've reviewed the purchase agreement between your association and Bayside Development, Jennifer continued. While that agreement does grant you management rights over certain shared amenities, it does not include authority over individually owned slips. The legal opinion your attorney provided appears to have overlooked this critical distinction. Our legal counsel has assured us our position is sound, Diane said coolly. Then your legal counsel should review these deeds, Jennifer replied, maintaining her professional tone. The language is unambiguous. My clients own their property outright. You cannot impose fees or restrictions on property you don't control. The silver-haired attorney picked up one of the deeds and read it. His expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something that might have been concern. He whispered to Diane, who shook her head. The HOA has a responsibility to maintain standards throughout the community, Diane said. That includes the marina facilities. We cannot have some slipholders operating under different rules than others. It creates confusion and undermines our authority. Your authority doesn't extend to private property, Jennifer said. That's not my opinion. That's property law. We purchased legitimate management rights, one of the other board members chimed in. We paid $75,000 for those rights. You purchased rights to shared amenities, Vincent said, unable to stay quiet. The parking lot and walkways, not the privately owned docks. Diane's eyes fixed on Vincent like a hawk spotting prey. And you are? One of the people who actually owns their property? Vincent shot back. Jennifer put a hand on Vincent's arm, a gentle warning to let her handle this. We're prepared to resolve this amicably. We've drafted a proposal that protects my client's property rights while acknowledging your legitimate authority over the shared amenities you did purchase. She slid a document across the table. Diane didn't pick it up. Her attorney did, though, and Robert saw his eyes moving quickly across the page. This is unacceptable, Diane said without reading it. We're not going to create a two-tiered system where some boat owners follow the rules and others don't. These aren't boat owners asking for special treatment, Jennifer said, her voice getting firmer. These are property owners asserting their legal rights. Rights that existed before your association was even formed. If we make exceptions for you, everyone will want exceptions, another board member said. This isn't an exception, Gerald spoke up, his voice carrying the weight of his 70-plus years. This is recognition of reality. We own our slips. You don't. End of story. Diane's face flushed. The HOA will not be bullied by a handful of disgruntled boat owners who don't want to follow the rules. And we won't be bullied by an association that's exceeding its authority, Robert said, keeping his voice level despite the anger building in his chest. The silver-haired attorney cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take a recess to review these documents more carefully. There's nothing to review, Diane snapped. Our position is clear. Her attorney gave her a look that said they needed to talk privately, but Diane wasn't having it. She stood up, placing both hands on the table. Here's what's going to happen, she said. You will comply with the HOAS policies. All of them. You will pay the required fees. You will follow the access restrictions. You will submit to our authority. If you refuse, we will fine you. We will restrict your access, and if necessary, we will take legal action to enforce compliance. We'll see you in court then, Jennifer said quietly. For just a moment. Something flickered across Diane's face. Uncertainty, maybe, or the first hint that she'd overplayed her hand. But it vanished quickly, replaced by that same cold smile Robert remembered from the first meeting. I look forward to it, Diane said. This meeting is over. The HOA board filed out, their attorney lingering for just a moment to look at the deeds one more time before following them. As soon as they were gone, Linda let out a breath she'd been holding. Well, that went about as badly as it could have, she said. Actually, it went exactly as I expected, Jennifer said, gathering up the documents. They've committed to their position publicly. Their attorney knows they're wrong. You saw his face, but Diane doesn't want to admit it. Now we file suit and let a judge explain reality to them. How long will that take? Tom asked. Months, maybe longer. But we have everything we need. The deeds, their flawed purchase agreement, their own documentation showing they overstepped. This is a strong case. Robert felt exhausted. The confrontation had taken more out of him than he'd expected. But looking around at his fellow boat owners, he saw determination on their faces. They'd come this far together. They'd see it through to the end. Let's do it, he said. File the lawsuit. Jennifer nodded. I'll have it ready by Monday. They walked out to the parking lot. Robert looked back at the condo building, slit windows glowing against the darkening sky. Somewhere in there, Diane was probably celebrating what she thought was a victory. She had no idea what was coming. Sometimes Robert thought. The biggest mistake powerful people make is underestimating the determination of ordinary folks who know they're right. Jennifer filed the lawsuit on a Monday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, Robert's phone was ringing with a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer, tired of the stress and uncertainty, but something made him pick up. Mr. Thompson, this is Douglas Mitchell. I'm the attorney representing the Harborview HOA. Robert's grip tightened on the phone. What can I do for you? I'd like to discuss a potential resolution to the current litigation. Would you and your attorney be available for a conference call this Friday? Robert called Jennifer immediately after hanging up. She sounded cautiously optimistic. That's fast. They must have reviewed the complaint and realized they're in trouble. Friday's conference call included Jennifer, Robert, and the other boat owners on one line, and Douglas Mitchell, plus 2 HOA board members on the other. Notably, Diane wasn't on the call. My clients would like to explore settlement options, Douglas began, his tone very different from the bored expression he'd worn at the meeting. After thoroughly reviewing the deeds and purchase documentation, we believe there may have been some miscommunication about the scope of the HOA's authority. Miscommunication, Gerald muttered. But Jennifer shushed him. What kind of settlement are you proposing? Jennifer asked. The HOA is prepared to acknowledge that the 6 slip holders with individual deeds are not subject to the recently implemented policies. They would be exempt from the new fees and access restrictions. That's a start, Jennifer said. What about reimbursement for fees already collected? There was a pause and some muffled conversation on the other end. The HOA collected a total of $2,700 from 4 of your clients before the lawsuit was filed. We're prepared to refund that amount in full. With interest, Jennifer said firmly. With reasonable interest, yes. And what about the legal fees we've already incurred? Another pause. The HOA would cover your filing fees and a portion of your legal costs. We're prepared to offer $5,000 toward your attorney fees. Jennifer looked at Robert, who shook his head. They'd already spent more than that, and would spend much more if this went to trial. Jennifer had prepared them for this possibility, the lowball settlement offer designed to make the problem go away cheaply. Mr. Mitchell, Jennifer said, let me be clear about where we stand. Your clients violated my client's property rights. They imposed illegal fees, made illegal threats, and even blocked access to legally owned property. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was deliberate overreach. My clients made decisions based on legal advice they received, Douglas replied, and Robert could hear the carefully worded excuse for what it was. Bad legal advice? Vincent interjected. Anyone who actually read those deeds would have known they couldn't do what they did. Nevertheless, Douglas continued, the HOA is willing to correct the situation. What would your clients consider a fair resolution? Jennifer had prepared for this too. Full reimbursement of all fees collected, plus interest. Payment of all legal costs incurred to date and estimated through settlement execution, approximately $15,000. A formal written acknowledgement that the 6 deed holders have independent ownership rights, not subject to HOA control, to be recorded with the county and posted in the HOA's common areas. And a guarantee that the HOA will not attempt any future interference with these property rights. That's excessive, Douglas said. But his tone suggested he'd expected as much. It's accountability, Jennifer replied. Your clients can accept these terms. Or we can proceed to trial where a judge will likely order the same thing, plus additional damages for harassment and violations. Of property rights law, the call ended, with Douglas promising to discuss the terms with his clients. Jennifer warned everyone not to get their hopes up for a quick resolution. But the next morning, Douglas called back. The HOA board had voted to accept all terms except the public posting requirement. They'd record the acknowledgement with the county but didn't want it displayed in common areas. Not acceptable, Jennifer said. The public posting ensures all residents understand that these slip owners have protected rights. It prevents this situation from happening again with future board members. They negotiated back and forth for 2 more days. Finally, the HOA agreed to post the acknowledgement in the community room and include it in the next newsletter to residents. Jennifer accepted. The settlement documents arrived by courier the following Monday. Jennifer reviewed every word before having her client sign. The HOA had 48 hours to execute their end and transfer the settlement funds. 46 hours later, Robert received a notification that $15,000 had been deposited into the escrow account. Jennifer had set up for the group's legal fees. 2 hours after that, each boat owner received direct deposits for their refunded fees plus interest.